All right, guys, I would like to welcome you back to the Restart Speaker Series. Today's guest is Matt Cordio. He is the founder and CEO of Skills Pipeline and also oversees Startup Milwaukee, which he'll be talking about in a moment. Before we start, if you don't have your copy of Restart, the Small Business Guide to Thriving During Chaos, that is available on Amazon for $14.99 in paperback and $9.99 as an ebook. The other thing I need to mention is that today's sponsor is Big Sky Amplify. They are based out of Missoula, Montana, and they provide small business software such as marketing automation, website development, CRM, all sorts of services. Ray Kempthorne, who's actually a childhood friend of mine, started the company, and a great outfit. So I'd recommend, if you're looking for small business software, to check out bigskyamplify.com. Matt, first of all, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Dave.
Great. So Matt, why don't you tell us, first of all, just a little bit about you personally, your work background, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur, I think, pretty much all my life. Had a bunch of different entrepreneurial ventures as a kid, in high school, in college, and right after I graduated from Marquette in 2012, went and launched really two different entrepreneurial endeavors. One being Skills Pipeline, which is a technology recruiting firm, helping growing tech companies hire tech talent, digital marketing talent, IT talent. The other one being Startup Milwaukee and Startup Wisconsin. And that is an organization dedicated to helping technology entrepreneurs in both Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin really grow and thrive, and connect them to the resources they need to do that in the region they live in.
Great. All right. So many of our audience, they are either entrepreneurs and they've got their startup companies or their small businesses. And the classic method that they've used is they've used a service like Wix or Squarespace or Weebly or something like that. And now they're looking to, hand off the maintenance of that website or expand their needs. Before we dive into that, why don't you talk a little bit about what a CMS is and why someone would use a CMS, as an entry point?
Yeah, so a content management system, CMS, is a great, I think, system to help organize content, ensure that you're, as a business owner, able to adapt the content of your website, whether it's the copy on the website, the different branding and logo elements of your website, as well as if you're doing e-commerce, add new products or service lines quickly to your company's web presence. And I think kind of you always want to have that at a very basic level, like you're using maybe Wix or Squarespace or Weebly, and those are very basic content management systems. It's so easy. Like, I've built several Squarespace websites, and there's a new tool I'm experimenting with called Webflow, which is just a different flavor of that. But then you can get to the point where you may have the need to further customize the way that you look. I think one of the disadvantages to using some of the popular platforms is it's very obvious to a user. Like, if you're visiting a Squarespace website, it's usually easy to tell, that this was built using Squarespace or Wix or whatnot. So you may want to further differentiate your company's brand presence. You may also just have, more traffic than a content management system like that can handle. If you're doing e-commerce and you really need to, have a highly reliable site that's fast and you can have multiple people doing transactions on it, that's when you might want to upgrade to having a web development firm come in. And, they often will use a content management system, but often they'll use it, a more robust platform, whether it's Adobe or WordPress or whatnot, and then they'll their development team will really customize it to your brand, to your specific business requirements. And also on the back end, they'll make sure the hosting and infrastructure is properly set up to handle the traffic that you're getting.
So yeah, we could have a static website, right? And what I mean by that is it's just content, with a Wix, with a Weebly. We use GoDaddy, quite a bit for, startups that I'm consulting with and students. And they're like, okay, just go ahead and launch a landing page. If it's e-commerce, they might use one of those platforms, or they might use something like Shopify, right? Which is another tool. But when it gets into a platform where, like I think, summarizing, a platform where they want to tailor it more to look more professional, to not look like, for example, their competitor's website. And then the other major thing I caught was if there's large traffic flow. So you might, for example, Shopify might not be able to handle the traffic, and maybe you need to use a service like AWS or something like that to handle a database. In fact, to that end, why don't you talk, we'll come back to the main point, but why don't you talk a little bit about AWS, because we see ads on TV for Amazon Web Services. Just kind of enlighten the audience on, on what AWS is and what sort of service they provide.
Yeah, so AWS, Amazon Web Services, is a public cloud platform developed by Amazon. So was started as actually, Jeff Bezos, a brilliant guy that he is, he realized he had a very highly reliable website and really good infrastructure backing that. And he just made the Amazon cloud infrastructure that provides the hosting and support for the website available to customers of Amazon and other enterprises. So Amazon's one of the public cloud platforms that's very popular. I believe Netflix uses them. Other large tech companies have their own public cloud platforms as well. So Microsoft Azure would be very comparable to AWS, as well as Google's Google Cloud Platform, or GCP. Those are kind of the three major public clouds. And what it really allows you to do as somebody hosting your website on those platforms is access highly reliable infrastructure that is maintained and backed up across multiple sites, which enables you to take more traffic and scale up as you need that additional hosting capacity, but also keep it low and scale down to better manage your costs.
Right.
Really all about managing costs, keeping those low, and having a reliable web presence for your company as well.
Yeah, and for those people that, they hear, oh my gosh, it's in the cloud, and there's this big mystery. What is the cloud? Well, it's basically the internet, right? And versus us hosting, a website on our laptop or GoDaddy's, servers. If you look at AWS or Azure, there's basically if you look at these data centers, it's just really stacks of computers, right? They're essentially hosting their site, and they have the capability to not only take a lot of traffic, but they also have redundancies, right? Do you want to, the risk of getting a little bit too granular there, do you want to talk about the benefit of those redundancies and how that works?
Yeah, and pretty much all major hosting providers have redundancies in some ways, whether it's like a GoDaddy or an Amazon Web Services or Azure. Essentially what it means is that your copy of your site is probably hosted across multiple different virtual servers in different, ultimately it's on a piece of hardware like a server in these various sites across the country and or in some cases around the world. Yeah. And, it really enables you to have more uptime. Granted, there have been horror stories of all the major cloud hosting services have had some outages, but for the most part, they're more reliable than if you were to, hire a small web development shop to host your website in their server, or if you were to host it on a computer in your office. Those larger cloud services are out there with massive teams maintaining their infrastructure 24/7.
All right, so let's say I'm this startup or small business, and I've said, look, I've got to focus, as the cliche goes, on focusing on the business versus in the business. You're realizing that you can't do sales and accounting and maintain your website and all of the other elements. And you're saying, okay, now what I have to do is I have to focus on growing the business, right? At its core. I mean, generally, the leader of the company should be doing whatever they can to grow the business. So I've reached that point, and I realized I need to outsource someone. I don't want to hire someone, definitely could be someone on a contract basis, or I'm going to hire another firm. What sort of do's and don'ts would you recommend that these folks consider before outsourcing?
Yeah, often when I talk to entrepreneurs, a lot of us, myself included, are very frugal. So a lot of people, often the conversation starts around, I'm going to hire somebody part-time on a contract basis to do my website, maybe a freelancer or something. And there are freelancers that are very talented that do web development. And that's great. I think that the things you want to consider as an entrepreneur are kind of, how is that project going to be approached by whoever you engage to do it? So, there are really several critical parts of web development. I think they kind of lie in kind of a couple different buckets. One is the design and functionality of the website. Is it easy for a user to use? Does it look visually appealing? Do you yourself as a company already have somebody doing design for you that's capable of doing web design? You want to think about the design portion of it. That's the first thing that people see when they visit your website. The second part is the accessibility of it. And really, are you fully leveraging the tools that you have available to promote your company on the internet? And so, there's a very popular marketing term, SEO, or search engine optimization. And pretty much every content management system that you have, whether it's a small Squarespace or GoDaddy website, search engines are able to discover those sites, but they aren't fully leveraging some of the search engine optimization strategies that a good web developer, a good web development firm can implement for you. And the cheapest way to get people to your website is through organic traffic and having good SEO or search engine optimization. The way to take it to the next level is to do SEM, or search engine marketing, and that often includes paid advertising on different platforms, whether it's Google or Bing, and that's almost something that I've never seen an entrepreneur that owns a small business and is in the weeds trying to do that. I myself have experimented multiple times with search engine marketing and trying to buy Google AdWords that I think makes sense, and it's pretty frustrating if you don't know how to do it. Just throwing $500, $1,000 at Google AdWords often won't get you the results you want. So, in terms of design, then you want to think about accessibility and search engine accessibility, and as well general accessibility for users who are coming to you from different platforms, whether that be, the majority of web traffic is coming from your mobile phone. So is your site, does it look presentable on a mobile phone, on an iPhone, on an Android phone, as well as on the browser? Are you able to easily check out, if you have an e-commerce functionality to your site on all those platforms? You just want to make sure your site's accessible. The third part of it is really kind of the technology backbone that's powering the site. So you want to make sure, that it enables you to have a great design and implement advanced SEO strategies. But you also want to make sure that technology backbone is highly available. Kind of back to that hosting thing, it's able to be hosted on a platform that's scalable and reliable, whether it's AWS or Azure or another cloud platform. But you also want to make sure that it's strong technology platform that is easy for you to use as an end user too. You aren't going to totally want to give up control of your website. I think you're going to want to have a way to administer functionality or have somebody on your team, if you're selling products or services, have them be able to quickly and easily update the website without messing up some of the other things that a professional web development firm can put in place to you to make your site look good, be more accessible, and be highly available.
Yeah, there's 2 points kind of that I thought about as you were going through that. So, and these aren't, well, they're all linked to what you just said, but one of the things I've found is you'll get graphic designers and they're like, oh yes, I'm great at doing website development, but they might not, understand keywords. They might not, have the time or the desire to create backlinks. And similarly, you might get the people that are programmers and their design skills aren't very good. And so I always get nervous if there's any complexity to the site to say, oh yeah, go ahead, take it, right? I would rather have, multiple people or a firm that has a designer and has a programmer. Well, first of all, what are your thoughts on that? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I tend to believe that it's best to engage a firm that has a proven track record of developing great sites. And really, I never suggest going to just one firm that you think looks good and has a great portfolio and getting a quote from them. Really talking to 2 or 3 different providers at least. And really then checking the boxes against, do they have experience working with types of companies that are similar to yours? Do they have kind of case studies or proven results in terms of driving traffic through organic search engine optimization? And then do they have sites that are visually appealing to you? Are you able to go play around with them and see if they meet the functionality that you need as a business? And then go and approach them about getting a quote. But, also get multiple opinions, because you're often going to get 2 or 3 different viewpoints, even if you're going to a web development firm, and you're going to see different price points. And I think that ultimately, it's going to, really provide great insight to get those multiple quotes.
I think the other point, I had it was a friend of a friend recently, and she was opening up, I think it was a flower shop. And, she needed to kind of take the website to the next level. And I said, look, it might be time to kind of farm that out to, to someone else. And I said, well, what's your website address and where did you get that? And they said, oh, the people told me not to worry because they purchased my website address and they handle all the hosting too. Isn't that wonderful? And I'm like, well, it was before, but it might not be now. Do you want to talk about why it might not be now?
Yeah, that's always something I think you want to be careful about when you're starting a business. I think obviously you're going to maybe start with like a GoDaddy or a Squarespace website where you can go acquire your domain. And it gets tricky to transfer those domains to different hosting registrars and whatnot, but you usually want to make sure you're the one that has that domain registered to your name, especially if it includes your company's name to it. And you never want to sign any agreement that enables them to do that. I think too, you want to look at when you're selecting a provider that's working with you on web development, is that they're using platforms that they may be more professional grade and something you couldn't do yourself, but you want to make sure that other web development firms that are reputable are able to work with those platforms, because you rarely want to start from scratch when you have something that you're building. So, is the content management system that the firm is using widely used by other firms? Is it in a programming language that is widely known by software developers? Because there are some niche CMSs that I've seen that it's impossible then to find somebody to transition to if something goes bad with your service provider. And then 2, it's always about those legal agreements when you're entering into a relationship with a web development provider, ensuring that you own the intellectual property they're developing, and that you have control over that. And that's too, I think, one of the reasons to use the public cloud. Some web development firms will offer their own hosting services, but you really want to, I think, work towards using a public cloud or a third party that, if you had to transition web developers, there's somebody in between, you and the actual code and the website that can, transfer from one web development provider to another.
Okay. Before we get to my questions, one other important one. I'll just say a website architecture map, guys, is important. And this is where you can see the flows and what page you're going to end up with. I think we could probably have another half an hour conversation on that. But make sure you'll agree. Obviously, you have some sort of map so you know what you're getting for. And I think the other important point, again, I'm just going to add this, is if you're the client, ideally, you're getting this quote based on a project price. So here's what we're going to do, and here's the price. I'm always kind of reticent to purchase any services on a time and materials basis because, obviously things could change and they might say, well, this took us 10 hours and you might find out it took 20 minutes. Now, if you're the provider of those services, you'd much rather do it on a time materials basis in general. I've found, it's easy to get burned on that. Now, again, it all comes down to defining that scope. And one of the things I've found tough, because I've been on I was on the agency side, is there's always scope creep, right? It's like, oh, can you just, right? Whenever I heard that, I'm like, oh no, can I just means it's going to be more expensive for me and less expensive for you being the client. But, if you can, maybe come to some sort of arrangement that's mutually beneficial when we say, okay, here's the scope of the project. It's going to cost X. And plus it's whatever, $150 or $200 for each additional page, because that scope usually doesn't shrink. It almost always goes like that. I mean, at the risk of asking you a rhetorical question, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree that a project basis is the best way to enter into a development agreement with a software developer. Sometimes that's just not possible, but I think, it's always on the entrepreneur, on you to define clearly the scope that you're doing. You want, and it's very easy to, I think, to map out the functionality that you want.
Right.
And that actually, going through that exercise before you engage a web development firm is going to help you too, because that gives you a baseline where you can go request different proposals from different web development firms and really stack them up on the, I think, and really compare them more efficiently and effectively than if you were to just allow a web development firm to go and define what they think they need to use. Yeah. Because, much like any sales situation, you're going to get full service from a firm if you don't tell them of what you really do need and what you don't need.
Yeah, I think the other point with that is when I'm, consulting to small businesses or startups or larger businesses, they're like, what should it look like? I don't know. This might look pretty, but is it going to do the job? And I say, look, there's no harm in going out and looking at the companies that are very successful, right? And, these companies got there because they're making many good decisions, obviously some bad ones, but take a look at their website, look at the UX, and we'll have another show, but the user experience and the interface, what does that look like? Obviously we don't want to copy it, but start there, and you can say to the website development firm, hey, I like this on this website. Can you marry these two sort of things up? Obviously, you don't want to, violate any copyrights or anything like that. So, all right, let's go out to questions. We've got a question from Jake. Jake's talking specifically about e-commerce. I know that his company actually does B2B e-commerce. What would be the tipping point at which you would say, Jake, you should move from Shopify to a custom e-commerce platform when X happens? What's that tipping point where you would make that decision if it was your firm?
So that's a hard one to answer, particularly in the Shopify realm, as Shopify now has been, used by larger and larger companies. There's some fairly large companies using Shopify specifically to power their e-commerce.
Okay.
What I would say is there are agencies that work with Shopify to optimize things like search engine optimization, just design and customization on the design aspect of it. So, if you're generating revenue substantially from your site and you're looking to do more of that, and you have your business model and some validation down, you may want to look at and engage a Shopify agency, for example, as to what they can do to, further build out your website, leveraging that platform's functionality. But like if you were on GoDaddy, using a GoDaddy e-commerce site, it's once again kind of, do you need to upgrade the design and whatnot? And then do you transition to a content management system that's a strong e-commerce content management system like Shopify, or there are just dozens of them out there?
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so how much could you expect to pay for a website? I think that might be a little tough based on needs. Let me ask you this. Let's go to an hourly rate. So, guys, if you're pricing out services, some ad agencies or design firms will say, look, our hourly for a copywriter is $80 an hour. Or web developers are 120. If you're doing strategy as well, maybe it's a blended rate or something like that. If you are forced in this position, or you choose to agree to time and materials, let's just break this down into designers and programmers, or the actual developers. How would you price? What are some reasonable ranges when it comes to those prices?
I would actually, so with like design and development, I typically see them being about the same rates.
Okay.
And it really depends on the caliber of the agency that you're engaging, and kind of what the scope of the project is. On my recruiting side of the business, I work with some digital agencies, and they're, invoicing clients $250 an hour for developer designer's time. They're working with Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies to do that. But, I think, kind of an hourly rate for development and design, anywhere between, $100 to $250, it seems reasonable in the Midwest. Depends on too where you are in the country, and kind of the complexity and quality of the work you want done too. Could you find somebody on like Odesk or Elance or some sort of freelancing site charging $50 an hour, or somebody internationally doing that? Yes. There are a whole bunch, and that's a whole nother episode on why, you probably want to have a design firm, managing your website development project, and why you probably want to do that here.
So what you're saying is on the, and again, if it focuses small businesses and startups, spending $100 an hour would not be an unreasonable amount. Again, we'll talk about
and in fact, that's probably low.
Pardon?
And in fact, $100 is probably low.
Okay.
It's probably going to come more like the average is probably going to be about $150 to $175 an hour.
And then if you're getting into complex stuff like building databases and, e-com stuff like that, that rate can increase quite a bit, obviously, as well.
Yeah, the more specialized and the more kind of heavy duty development you're going to need done, the more expensive those resources are going to be. As they probably are at a larger agency.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, that one, I think I'm going to save that one for another show. We're talking equity. All right, so I do have one question, and this kind of goes back in time. You're not going to outsource, but let's say you're going to insource this thing, or you could be outsourcing. If someone was to choose between, some of the standard CMS platforms, whether it's, GoDaddy or Squarespace or Wix or Weebly, and you're at that point where you need to make a decision, which platform or platforms do you like and why? So let's say you don't have 10, 20 grand, whatever. You've got $20 a month to spend or $100 a month. Which CMS and what do you like and why?
Yeah, I am a heavy Squarespace user,
Okay.
and that's because all my companies are using it.
Okay.
And my companies aren't like very reliant on a heavy web presence.
Right.
So it's simple and easy for me and my team to use.
Right.
So I can go in there and I made a quick change yesterday in 5 minutes. I've also been playing around a little bit with Webflow because I like the design and customization and ease of use of that platform.
Right.
Haven't pushed anything to production yet, but I'm working on my personal website, actually on both Webflow and Squarespace, and I'll select whatever one looks better. But those are great platforms, and you can do a lot with them. And it's very easy for you to use.
All right. There's so many other shows we can do, like, what's a good select, like,
wow, could do a weekly, a daily series for a couple weeks.
Yeah, we could. Okay, well, you know what? We're actually over on time, and the viewers know I'm kind of militant about time. So let's kind of wrap this up. So if they want to learn a little bit about Skills Pipeline or connect with you, what's the best way to do that, Matt?
Yeah, so the best way to connect with us, skillspipeline.com. My email is just Matt, M-A-T-T, at skillspipeline.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
Actually just recently got off all my other social media platforms. So
that's another show as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So LinkedIn, any other ways to contact you, or is that sufficient?
I'm on Twitter too.
Okay.
I tweet now probably once a week instead of.
Wow! Holy cow! So, you're crushing it. All right. Okay. And lastly, just want to give a big thanks to our sponsor, Big Sky Amplify. So Big Sky Amplify provides a whole suite of small business software, everything from a website builder tool to CRM, marketing automation, and then it's sold on a subscription basis as well. The person that runs that firm is called Ray Kempthorne, and you can go to bigskyamplify.com. And again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but we are definitely going to have another show with Matt because there's so many other important elements to cover when it comes to your website and outsourcing and development and all of those other elements. So, Matt, thanks for your time today. Viewers, thanks for tuning in. We will post this video to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and Matt's information and Big Sky Amplify's information will be in the comments as well. Thanks a lot, and have a great day, guys.